and say that in my experience, they very rarely stumble into my class. I mean, I have a lot of students that come from the journalism school or the political science department or the sociology department, and it's clear to me from their emails, because they're eager to get into the class and there's a limited amount of places available, that they see a course about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's something that is essential to their training, either as students or journalists or sociologists, etc.
I want to say, I teach a course called War and Peace in Israeli Poetry. And I get a lot of students wandering in precisely because they couldn't get into, the Arab-Israeli conflict course, or it's not being offered, and they think that this
poetry is the next best thing.
And they think, well, this will be an opportunity to learn about the conflict, and they get to my class. And what I'm offering them, in fact, is the counter voice. Here we have the conflict, and how does it affect daily life? How does it affect families? How does it affect the wives of soldiers? What is a concept of peace? It doesn't just mean that we're all living in a kind of unified harmony together. What is that notion of peace as Israel understands it? And that offers students, I think, another way into the conflict.
Something that kind of fascinates me, an idea that just cropped up, is to take the concepts that you've both described, and that is the evolution in the student's mind of an image of Israel and of Israelis that is derived from literature, derived from an understanding of history. It would be interesting to juxtapose that image against what you have discerned, Sergio, as the reality of Israelis and their concerns. And do you, Sergio, find any dissonance when you yourself look at Israeli culture, literature example, or look at the security situation, that Israelis maybe don't have a fully formed understanding of their own situation?
Looks like there is some kind of dissonance. But I don't think so. No, I think they have incorporated and somewhat metabolized the situation, which is complex, and they can navigate through it. They find ways. There are concerns. We have all gone through moments. Of course, we have spouses, children, or parents who go to the army, and there are moments where we are fearful. But yet we know that overall, A, it is part of our life, and B, as we say in Hebrew, it will be okay. Ze yeh tov. And I don't think that's a lack of understanding. No, I think it's really being able to cope. But I would like to add something. There is nothing like seeing the place with your own eyes at the end of the day to understand it properly. And this is something that sometimes you find is missing in public discourse and in what people feel, because there aren't 1,000 words that will just substitute one image. You see one thing and you understand lots of things, and you understand the place. And so that's what perhaps we should try to find a way to bring students on a traveling experience. A short one would be enough, because that's sometimes much more than the best faculty can give.
I have a question about another dimension of all of this. I mean, I think we're fortunate, very fortunate to have faculty teaching Israel on campus, very fortunate to be in an environment where Israel studies is gaining currency and traction. Do you have a sense, and I would put this question to all of you, that the kinds of courses that you're teaching and the sorts of students who you're reaching, as well as the faculty who you're in discourse with, are developing over time a better understanding, a more nuanced understanding of Israel and its population? Or do you think there's a tremendous amount of territory yet to cover in reaching that more sophisticated understanding?
Well, of course, it would be nicer to have a broader program. Where I am at UIC, I think it's a high-quality program, not a very big one, though. And of course, if you could cover more territory, that would be helpful. I think, though, in spite of its limited size, it produces an impact on the community, because each will then tell something to a circle of other people. So I think this is extremely powerful in any case.
I'd like to add to that, actually, and say that it's really important to develop these positions, because when you send a single faculty member into an academic environment in isolation discussing one field, you both deprive them of the opportunity of collaboration and intellectual growth, and you prevent the students from having the broadest possible picture. We would never send students to an English department and expect them to do Shakespeare and nothing after and nothing before. And in the same way, we have to think of Israel studies as a discipline with multiple aspects to it, and that no single faculty member can cover all of those things. And the more support that is given to universities, particularly in a time of economic crisis where universities are being forced to cut back, the more the community can come together to offer help in creating these positions, the stronger the opportunities on campus, both for faculty and for students, will be about learning more on Israel.
There's no question about it, that if a student come to one of my seminars, he gets a more complex picture of the conflict. I mean, it comes without saying, but I want to go back to something Sergio said about that being Israeli is about coping, learning to cope, because I come from Tel Aviv, and he talked about images, that, you know, one image is better than 1,000 words. Tel Aviv is a city that celebrates normalcy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
100 years.
Yes. Yes. So that's an excellent example. It's not so much of a dissonance as learning to live with the situation.
And I think you're right as well in talking about the need to go to Israel. We would never conceive of Spanish programs or French programs without students having the opportunity to go, to travel in the country, to use their language skills. I remember studying Arabic as an undergraduate student and having the perfect words to discuss the feminist literary revolution in Egypt, but I couldn't ask for a loaf of bread. And those kinds of language experiences only come from going to the country. And just as cultural and intellectual growth happens from travel, so does the linguistic growth. And, you know, as in Hebrew literature, I'm encouraging my students access to the language itself.
But you can say that short of going to Israel, the very fact that they have a course on Israel, and that you were there, right?
Right, absolutely.
And you bring something of that to the classroom, that you've been there and you...
Absolutely.
Do you find, because of the Birthright Israel program and other Israel Experience programs that many students in Illinois have been able to participate in, that you have kind of feeder programs, if you will? Is that your experience in terms of the makeup of your student body, that you have significant numbers of students who have Israel Experience?
Not really in my case. In my case, not in my class. But however, there is no doubt that programs such as Birthright do have an impact, and they do create that platform upon which then a person comes back to the US and will be certainly more knowledgeable, even more motivated at being part of a community. And I think it can be shown that there is a persistent effect of the Israeli experience.
I think there's also a sense of curiosity for students when they come back from those trips. And in my experience, I've had students who take my courses beforehand as they're planning to go, or who come to my classes when they've returned. But it's a section of the class, it's not the entire class, because not all of our students are Jewish, and not all of our students are coming to Israel studies from that perspective. Nevertheless, I think it does open the door for many students and is a really important part of the student experience.
Some of my students have been in the Middle East, not necessarily Israel, but that's another question I wanted to bring up, and that is about American students learning about Israel or the Arab-Israeli conflict and feeling somewhat uncomfortable with saying things because it's a touchy subject. That in a way, one of the things we need to do in the classroom is create this atmosphere of an open debate, because even if they have been in the Middle East, they will not bring that up.
Right. Interesting. Is it a hurdle to create that atmosphere, or is it something that you find has been fairly doable?
It's like a contract. You sign with them in the first lesson, and you tell them that, in Hebrew you always say that I do not bite. Whatever you say, I will not bite you. And then they feel okay.
We have a limited amount of time left. I'm wondering if each of you has maybe one nugget of understanding that you hope your students leave your course with vis-a-vis Israel that they didn't have coming in.
Well, certainly the understanding of the complexity and the willingness to know more and maybe to go and see the place and to continue this process of learning and growing.
That they won't have a black and white image of the conflict. It's a very colorful picture, and there are many opinions among the Arabs, and there are many opinions among the Israelis, and they should keep an open mind when they read the newspaper or see the news.
And it must be remarkable to watch that opinion formation take place over
during the process of a seminar. So for some of them, it's a little bit like they're thankful. For being a midwife for that process.
Right, and
Rachel?
And
I also think it's interesting to create this sense of curiosity in pursuing cultural and intellectual knowledge outside the framework of the classroom, to read books, to see films. And I often have students long after they've left my class go and see things and write to me and say, I just saw this film, it's just come out, you would like it, or it would be of interest, or maybe you would want to use it in a class, because we've created this sense of the pursuit of knowledge among our students.
And I imagine the experience of teaching these courses has probably fueled thoughts about future courses to come. One very brief last question, is there one thing that you feel needs to be taught vis-a-vis Israel that is not yet being taught?
I think in any institution we can only teach as many courses as we can teach, so there's always things that aren't being taught, and that can range from urban planning and archaeological development and architectural development on one hand, to popular culture, to film, to music on the other. So I think that's too big a question.
Yes. And hopefully each of you will have opportunities going forward to develop new course ideas. It's very encouraging to hear that there is a demand for these courses, and I would wish you all the best of luck going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks to all of you, Professors Harris and DellaPergola and Dr. Laron, for giving us a look at the expanding field of Israel studies on our campuses. And thanks also to the Jewish Federation's Israel Studies Project. Don't forget, you can get daily updates on the Jewish community and Israel at the Jewish United Fund website, www.juf.org. As always, we welcome your input and encourage you to write us with your comments and questions. Our address is 30 South Wells Street, room 5056, Chicago, Illinois, 60606. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you all have a wonderful Hanukkah. We'll see you in February. Shalom.